Hello everybody, today we're going to be making Teochew style fried pork and shrimp bean curd rolls, also known as Hei Zho. For this recipe, you're going to need some fatty ground pork, peeled and deveined white shrimp, water chestnuts, or if you don't have that, you can also use jicama, 5 whole garlic cloves, cornstarch, and 2 whole large eggs. You're also going to need several sauces and spices, which I'll list on the screen right here, and all you have to do is just put them in a bowl and give them a good mix. To start, you're going to want to whisk your eggs together with any tool you'd like. I personally like to use chopsticks. Afterwards, just set it aside. Next, I'm going to mince up my garlic with this mini food processor. If you don't have a mini food processor, you can also do this with a knife. I personally love this food processor because it's very inexpensive and it chops up garlic in a matter of seconds. It's also cordless, which is a plus. If you're interested in this food processor, you can find a link for it in the description below. Once the garlic is all minced up, we're going to add it to the seasoning sauce that we made earlier and give it a good mix to infuse the garlic flavor. Then we're going to set it aside. Now we're going to dice up our water chestnuts by cutting in halves and cutting it into small tiny cubes. You can definitely cut these bigger if you want, but I personally like to cut them smaller because sometimes I'm not the biggest fan of water chestnuts. Once you dice up all your water chestnuts, just set it aside and move on to your shrimp. For the shrimp, you're going to want to separate about 1/4 of your shrimp and peel and devein them. Mine was already peeled and deveined, so I'm going to go ahead and just start slicing them into small pieces just like this. When it comes to using shrimp, I highly recommend getting the ones that are already peeled and deveined to save you lots of time, especially if you don't know how to properly clean shrimp. Once you sliced 1/4 of the shrimp, just set it aside and then we're going to start on mincing the rest. To mince the shrimp today, I'm once again using the mini food processor that I used earlier. This was honestly my first time using it to mince up shrimp, and I was so surprised that it was strong enough to do it. So you just want to mince up your shrimp until you get a texture just like this. Once the shrimp is minced up, you can go ahead and add it to the previously sliced shrimp. Because my food processor was pretty small, I had to do this in a few batches. However, I know not many people might have a food processor, so I'm going to also show you how to do it with a knife. You want to start by just slicing all the shrimp into smaller pieces, and then you're going to want to chop them with this motion right here. So just continue to repeat the same steps until your shrimp is all minced up just like this into a nice paste. Now that everything is prepped, we're going to create the filling by putting the ground pork into a bowl and combining it with the seasoning sauce that we added the garlic to. With the spatula, I'm just breaking up the ground pork and mixing it until it's well combined. Once the sauce and the ground pork is fully combined, we're going to add in the shrimp and mix it together. You don't have to mix it too much because after we're going to mix it by hand to create a smooth paste. When mixing by hand, you want to make sure that the shrimp is fully incorporated with the ground pork. Next, we're going to add in the diced up water chestnuts and mix to combine. So like I mentioned earlier, I wasn't the biggest water chestnut fan, so I ended up using less than my recipe requires, so feel free to use the same amount or less like I did. Now we're going to add a few tablespoons of cornstarch to the mixture and then give it a good mix until there are no traces of cornstarch left. Be sure to mix it thoroughly and make sure there are no clumps of cornstarch in the mixture. After, we're going to add in the eggs that we beaten earlier to the mixture so we can bind everything together. Some say that the egg is actually optional, but I feel that it helps keep the filling shape when you steam it. The mixture might seem a little wet at first, but just keep mixing it in a circular motion until it gets nice and combined. So you want to just keep mixing in one direction until you get a texture just like this. If your mixture seems to be too liquidy, you can add half a tablespoon of cornstarch at a time until it thickens up. Once you get the right consistency and the filling is well mixed, you're going to want to cover it and store it in the fridge. Next, you're going to want to prepare your steamer with some boiling water so it's hot and ready when we need it afterwards. To prevent the rolls from sticking to the steamer, I'm using this homemade parchment paper with holes in it that I DIY'd myself. If you don't have parchment paper, you can just brush a little oil to prevent it from sticking. Next, we're going to start by preparing the bean curd sheet so that we can fill it with the filling. For this specific recipe, I'm using this 8-ounce pack that actually came with a few sheets inside. If you happen to get smaller packs, make sure you open one pack at a time so it doesn't dry out too fast. Sometimes the bean curd sheets can be super fragile, so you just want to be very careful when you unwrap it. For some reason, all of my sheets had this side on it that was hard to unfold, so I just decided to cut it off, all of them. Thankfully, we don't need the whole 8 ounces of bean curd sheets, so it's okay if you rip or lose some of the pieces. To prepare the sheets, you just want to keep folding it until you can get rectangular pieces that are about 6 by 8 inches long. You can totally use a knife to cut up the bean curd sheets, but I find that scissors are the perfect tool to use. This is how big your sheet should look, however you can make it bigger if you'd like. Next, you want to grab a wet napkin or towel and wipe down both sides of the bean curd sheet in case they have excess salt on it. Make sure you don't skip this step because you might not want the added salt for your finished product. Next, it's time to fill the wrappers. You're going to need about 4 tablespoons of filling and just line it across the edge just like this. After, you're going to want to dip your fingers into a bowl of water and just wet the bean curd sheet so it's easier to roll. Then, just like a burrito or Vietnamese summer roll, just tuck it forward and fold the sides in. You can also wet these flaps right here if you need extra sealing. Then just continue to roll it forward to seal and repeat the same steps with the rest of your bean curd sheets. And just like that, all the hard work is done and now they're ready for steaming. By now, the water for the steamer should be ready and you can start by placing all the rolls into the steamer. Also, make sure you double check the water levels for your steamer as we will be steaming this on medium heat for 15 minutes. After 15 minutes has passed, your rolls should be fully cooked and you want to transfer them to a plate to cool down. While the rolls are cooling down, you want to heat up enough oil in the pot so that you can deep fry them afterwards. Once the rolls are cool to touch, you want to slice them on a bias just like this. I noticed that most people actually cut these into circular pieces, however I find that when you cut it on a bias and you deep fry it, it just looks way better. Before we deep fry them, we're going to want to coat them with some cornstarch. I didn't have any more cornstarch, so I used tapioca starch, which is totally fine as well. So just go ahead and dunk in some pieces in, and then you're going to want to shake off any of the excess flour. If you don't have a sifter, you can also use your hand to shake off the excess flour. Once they're all nice and coated, we're going to check on the oil to make sure it's ready to deep fry. My favorite technique to see if the oil is hot and ready is to dip wooden chopsticks in, and if it bubbles, it's ready. Next, you're going to want to put in as many pieces as your pot can fit. Keep in mind that all the rolls are already cooked, so you don't have to worry about the temperature of the oil dropping. Now we're just going to deep fry them for a few minutes until they turn golden brown while stirring once in a while. Once they become gold enough, you're going to want to remove them from the oil and place them on some paper towels or a cooling rack so that the oil can drain. Once they're done frying, you can serve them immediately, or if you'd like, you can freeze them for a future date. My favorite way to serve this is with some Thai sweet chili sauce because it's just so good. This is one of my favorite Teochew dishes ever, and I'm so glad that I was able to share the recipe with you all. As usual, if you'd like the written recipe, you can find it on eatingwithblim.com or in the description below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.